Pharisees approached Jesus and asked, "Is it lawful for a husband to divorce his wife?" They were testing him. He said to them in reply, "What did Moses command you?" They replied, "Moses permitted a husband to write a bill of divorce and dismiss her." But Jesus told them, "Because of the hardness of your hearts, he wrote this commandment. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. They are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, no human being must separate." In the house, the disciples again questioned Jesus about this. He said, "Whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery." Hello and welcome to Closer Walk. I'm Father Bai, your host, and we're glad that you can join us today. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and cling to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. And what God has joined together, no human must divide. Marriage. Boy, where do you start on that subject today? A lot's changed. I remember back in the 70s when I was in theology in grad school, and we were talking about artificial contraception, and that was the big thing. And the question was artificial versus natural. And I spoke to a young priest in our diocese who was kind of bright. And I said, "Jerry," I said, "Look, man, I'm not getting the distinction, the whole contraception thing." He said, "Well, look," he said, "think about this. If marriage is only for the purpose of mutual satisfaction of the couple, why can't two men get married, or why can't two women get married?" This is back in the mid-70s. I said, "What are you smoking, man?" I said, "Are you crazy? Who ever thought of that?" And lo and behold, we find ourselves in a much different place. One of the things that I think is very, very important is that there's certain things that define us. The whole transgender thing is a big deal now. I might think of myself feminine, but the definition is, and based on the way we're built, you're male or female. There's a definition to what makes a person a male, and there's a definition to what makes a person a female. It is by very definition. Now, you can have an emotional attachment to something, either way, but your plumbing determines that. Just the way it is. And so it is with the definition of marriage. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and cling to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. When you've heard these arguments that they talk about, and the Pope has said it, about complementarity. He talks about the complementarity of the marriage between a male and a female. What he's talking about when he talks about the complementarity is he's talking about that anatomically we were built in such a way that man complements woman and woman complements man. I'm not going to go into a little show and tell here, but the reality is that's complementarity, because that's what we were made for. And in 1971, this document, Casti Connubii, it had the ends of marriage. It had primary ends of marriage and secondary ends of marriage. Primary ends of marriage was the procreation and education of children. We continue the race in the species by procreation and education of the children. The secondary was the mutual love and satisfaction of the couple. Well, Kasi Kanubi, in 1971, a papal encyclical, was kind of radical. It eliminated primary and secondary. It said mutual. The mutual ends of marriage were procreation and education of children and mutual love and satisfaction. Not one over the other, both were true. Young girl has some problem when she's young, comes to find out she's not capable of bearing children. She can still be married. She satisfies the mutual ends. She has not eliminated that. It's just not a possibility. When you define marriage for the procreation and education of children and mutual love and satisfaction, it's not a possibility. And so that complementarity is a very, very important process. It's very important for us to realize that anatomically, men were made to complement women, women were made to complement men. And it's not same sex. It's just not. Now, a lot of people say, it is a justice issue. You know, before they had what they call civil unions in some states. Civil unions was someone is partnered. And so they've been together 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. They wanted to be on their insurance program. They want them to receive benefits. As a civil matter, have no problem with that. Have absolutely no problem with that. The church has no problem with that. As a civil matter, when we start to deal with definitions of what marriage is, that's where the problem comes in. And the reality is that what we've done, and we've seen it already, as soon as the same-sex marriage was okay, then a number of people in the Mormon church says, then what about me? Why can't I have 3, 4, 5 wives? You have gone away from the biblical definition of what marriage is. It's no longer a man and a woman. It's no longer defined by God. Why can't we have a threesome marriage? Why can't people who believe in polygamy have 4, 5, 10 wives? Doesn't matter. When you take away and you redefine something, it's not an equality issue. No one's opposing that, persons can be recognized, they can love each other, do whatever. Of course, we have our own moral beliefs about same-sex, intimate genital activity, but we're not opposing that recognition. We're not opposing those benefits, whatever you want to say. We're not opposing that equality. We're not advocating that people be discriminated against. We're saying when you destroy the definition of marriage, as long as they love each other. This person loves their dog. They want to marry him and leave all their money to the dog. And for everything we can tell, every time they're together, the dog does nothing but lick their face. So, can they be married? Can you marry 4 or 5 people? Can you have a threesome marriage? Well, if marriage has been ill-defined and the traditional biblical definition of marriage no longer holds, then who's to say you can't have multiple husbands, multiple wives, any type of arrangement that you want? So this definition that we read, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and cling to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh, the complementarity, and what God has joined together, no man must ever divide. I think I would add something based on today. What God has defined as marriage, no man must redefine. That's the issue that we deal with. Now that this has happened, and people are trying to expand the notion of marriage. They're trying to expand it at this juncture to include polygamy. And I think they have a valid argument. If the biblical definition no longer stands, I think they have a valid argument. So what do we deal with? Well, we're already dealing with it. Along with this, we have allowed people to define themselves whatever they want to be. There are already lawsuits going. There's a junior in high school who, since he's been a freshman, he's been wearing a wig and he's been wearing a dress. Now he's demanding for his right to use the women's bathroom. He's demanding for his right to shower after gym class with women, because mentally he considers himself a woman. And so now we have to protect that right. We have to protect that right. Do you realize what a conundrum we're walking into? Do you realize when some little girl who considers herself a boy and is still anatomically female walks into a locker room after PE with a bunch of 17-year-old kids full of hormones? You realize what's going to happen? How many of our kids are going to be sex offenders by the time they graduate high school because they're in the shower and some little girl walks by? They don't care whether or not they got a deep voice. They're just looking at, it's all kinds of issues. When you're talking about marriage, we're not just talking about two people saying I do. When you're talking about marriage, you're talking about redefining something that God has established. When you open that floodgate, and in moral theology, we used to talk about the wedge argument. The wedge argument was you got your foot in the door, and once you were able to get that foot in the door, eventually you could kick that door wide open. I don't think we're really prepared for what this is going to do to society. You know, we keep talking about why are people so violent and kids today, and they're so angry, and they're so this, and they're so that. Realize how many kids are born without a father in the picture, a father in their life? How many of these kids live in poverty? Do you really think this is going to help us? Do you really think this is going to change the situation? Do you really think this is going to improve the quality of life and the security of the next generation coming up? No male figures in their lives, and so I decide I want to, you know, I was Freddie, now I want to be Frederica, and now it's incredible. I don't think we have any idea what we're embarking upon. Many good, faithful people are saying, look, I know someone, and they're in my family, and they're a good person, and they love this person of the same sex, and they've loved them for the last 10 years, and I'm happy for them, and I'm celebrating with them, and I think it's great that we finally give them a chance to be recognized, and we have no idea. We've taken the definition that God has set in place. We've replaced it with our own definition, and consequently, this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning of the deterioration. Now, our Lord also talks about reasons for divorce. That's another whole Catholic issue with what the Pope has just talked about last month. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment. Hi, I'm Father Jeff Baye from Closer Walk Catholic Communications. Thank you for being here today, and a special thanks for the support that you give us. First of all, your prayerful support we so desperately need, and also your financial support. We are donor-driven, and that is what keeps us on the air today. As you well know, the truth is in great demand and in very short supply, and mainstream media is not going to bring you the truth of the Gospels of our Lord Jesus Christ, because that's not socially acceptable and it's not politically correct. Certainly we all realize that when this life journey's over, we don't stand before the Supreme Court, we stand before the throne of God. Therefore, with great clarity and great charity, to pronounce the truth of the gospel is important. Your prayers, your financial support enables us to do that. So we thank you, and may God bring you closer in your walk with the Lord each day. God bless you. Is it lawful for a husband to divorce his wife? They were testing him. They said, what did Moses command of you? They said, Moses permitted a husband to write a bill of divorce and dismiss her. Jesus told them, because of the hardness of your hearts, he wrote that commandment. Divorce. Last month, before the Pope came to the United States, he issued this statement about annulments. A lot of people within the Catholic Church have gotten very, very cynical about the annulment process. They've oftentimes said, I don't believe in all that annulment stuff. That's just the Catholic Church's way of making money off of divorced people. They've also said, I'll never have my marriage annulled. All that does is makes my children illegitimate, and then no one's going to make my child a bastard. And they go on and on and on. There's a lot of misunderstandings about that. So let me try to give a little background. First of all, having worked on annulment cases for the last 35 years and been a judge in annulment cases for about 12 years, there's a lot of misconceptions. First of all, in order for an annulment to go through, a person has to prove some form of incapacity or inability that existed at the time of the marriage, some defect. It's not a question of, well, we were happy as clams for 30 years, all that, everything was great, we were loving, and all of a sudden, he decides to run off with somebody else, she decides to run off. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a defect. Let me give you some examples. Oh, well, I've been dating this guy, it was during the 70s, we were both doing drugs and everything, and our friends were getting married, so we went to a bridal show, and we won free tuxedos. So we decided we weren't going to waste them. We got married. I mean, we were stoned, but we got married. Okay, great. And for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and get stoned, okay? I mean, the insanity of it all, okay? I mean, and there, I have cases where I've got a girlfriend on the side. They had a girlfriend a week before the wedding. They had a girlfriend a week after the wedding. And I just stood in front of the priest, and there are three conditions: permanence, fidelity, and children. I intend a lifetime commitment. I'm going to be faithful to that person. Fidelity means not only monogamous in the sense of this is the only person that you engage in the conjugal act with, but when I say I'm going to be faithful to you, I'm going to do life with you. It's not your problem. It's not your crazy family. It's not, I had a situation not long after I married him, and the girl's father died unexpectedly. I go to the funeral home, and the girl sees me. She just collapsed. She's crying. I'm hugging and holding. She's just carrying on. Her husband's in the corner, and he's standing just like this. He stood there all night. He stood there all night. Never moved. Never moved. Poor lady is running around. Whoever will hold her, she's falling in their arms. I think he was unfaithful to her. Had nothing to do with, any type of sexual act. He was unfaithful. So permanence, fidelity, and children. People say, oh yeah, well eventually we're going to have children. We were only married 7 years, and she was on birth control the entire 7 years. There was never a non-contraceptive act in 7 years. And they had committed to have children, and before they got around to it, the marriage was broken up. So permanence, fidelity, and children are three issues. But a lot of the mistakes or the misconceptions are made from what people say. One is first of all, I know in our diocese, we employ a whole staff, an office of about 7 people that we pay full-time salaries to. So when we process a case, we say this is our cost. If you can pay it, we appreciate it. If not, pay whatever you can. If not, you're entitled to the process. The money is not the issue. You're entitled to the process. So when the Holy Father said, well, it's got to be free, it is. I mean, no one's denied the process, or at least in our diocese. I can't speak for around, the country or around the world, but that's pretty much already in place. The other thing is there was an automatic appellate process. The automatic appellate process was to keep mismanaging. Oh, this is Monsignor so-and-so's good friends. Of course they got an annulment. You know how much money they gave to the building fund for that new church? Of course they're going to get an annulment because they were good friends with Monsignor so-and-so. Well, this whole appellate process was an ability to make sure that there was a checks and balance in place. It wasn't to draw out the process. It wasn't to penalize people. The reality is that, because of the large numbers, that was a reason for the delay. Not because we intentionally strung it out, but that was a reason for the delay. One of the things is, and my background besides theology is psychology. And one of the things that we do is we give a complete, they call it the marital dynamics, a complete looking at yourself, at your past, at your history. I think it's the healthiest thing we do. It's a great examination of conscience. You got to look back over your life. Just because you're out of one marriage doesn't mean you're capable of being married to a second person. You can bring, the same problem. You can bring the same attitude. You got to look at yourself. You got to look at this. How'd this happen? No one person made it bad. We all made it bad. That was part of it, okay? And so that's a healthy process. I have a classmate who been married 7 times. I have people who come to me for 3rd and 4th annulments. And it's like, thanks for the ice cream cone. You don't get it, do you? We're not catching on here. There's an issue. And there are things that we have to deal with. Oftentimes, chemical issues affect a person's ability to establish what they call the communitas vitae, a community of life, because they're drugged out or they're drunk most of the time. Well, you know what? You're not going to be sober with the next person if you're an alcoholic. You're not going to be clean with the next person if you're a drug addict. There are issues you got to deal with. That's a healthy part of it. Now, what the Holy Father is asking is that we streamline the process, that we make it a little bit more attainable. I'm all in favor of that. That's a great thing. There are a lot of really wonderful people who feel alienated from the church. They've been successfully married 20, 30, 40 years in a second marriage because they had a youthful, silly, stupid situation. I'm all in favor of that. But we need to understand there was a value to it. There was a value to people looking at their lives. There was a value to the process not being in any one person's hands. That, we didn't feel like we were indebted to someone because they were in the parish, they had done X, Y, and Z. That's a difficult place to be. And we didn't want to be accused of that. That was the whole reason for the appellate process. Now, to talk about, that reality of divorce. Why is it important? Well, it's important because we have a generation of people who have completely separated the gift of human sexuality from a relationship. You hear it. Friends with benefits. The hookup culture. Look at the pornography industry. $42 billion a year. The danger of modern society of people looking at another person as an object of pleasure. And it happens. And so, we have people who have incredible sex lives and nothing else. We're together because we entertain each other. And this whole recreational aspect of sex with our young people is very, very difficult. The stability of marriage and family life is going to be greatly challenged. I'm telling you, I have high school kids who are addicted to pornography. They're 16, 17 years old. And I'm talking about 4 to 6 hours a day that they're online, viewing it, doing whatever to bring themselves pleasure, okay? How in God's name is this person ever going to have a relationship with a living person? There is no one they're going to marry who's going to swing from the chandeliers and entertain them the way they are on these videos. It's not possible. And so we not only have to deal with the realization that we need to welcome back those who've been alienated for the marriage issues, we need to deal with creating a marriage culture. That's what the World Family Meetings of Families in Philadelphia was about. It's a culture of the respect and the dignity of a human person, and attaching that pleasure that comes through human sexuality to a relationship, not to an act. And so when you've got a mother of a 14-year-old girl saying, I'm not ready to be a grandmother yet, so I'm buying my child, birth control pills. I had a junior in high school. The mother used to put a gross of condoms in his glove compartment every month. He was 16 years old. He's doing better than any 12 married men I know, okay? A gross of condoms a month because she didn't want to be a grandparent. Until we start to correct this idea that the gift of human sexuality is a recreational activity, we're going to keep digging a hole, and we're going to keep having multiple marriages and children who never see their father, never see their mother, whatever the case may be. There are issues we got to deal with. Please don't think just because an annulment is easier, now our problems are over. We're just starting with it. We're just starting with dealing with the whole idea of why we've become unmarriable. Why these children who played in a soccerless league, who are never wrong, who mom and daddy clean up all their mess, who in God's name are they going to marry? They're not capable of taking responsibility. Some great challenges that marriage faces. Just making sure we get to go back to communion is part of it. It's certainly not all of it. Wake up. We have a lot of work to do. We thank you for being with us. May each day bring you close in your walk with the Lord. God bless you.
Thank you for watching. For copies of today's program, please log on to closerwalkministries.com.